grandmother said to me once. She said, a lot of people think that before the settlers arrived, this place was an empty, vast land with nothing. She says, but it was the total opposite. She said you could camp somewhere and you could hear a buffalo herd miles away, moving, shifting around. You could hear them when they go across the land, the whole ground shakes. Life was teeming during the day and the night, so it was not empty. It was full of life.
Biodiversity in general, people on the one hand are very concerned about the loss of biodiversity, but on the other hand don't really understand how evolution works. So biodiversity is the end result of speciation with evolution, and that takes a very, very long time. And so when we lose these species, some people have misconceptions that, evolution will bring new ones to us. And it doesn't happen in that short of time. So for new populations to evolve into new species can take millions of years. So one of the biggest threats to biodiversity is habitat loss due to human development and agriculture, especially here in Alberta. And so when we think about people who want to make money off of a housing development, how are they going to, or how are we going to justify keeping this around just for native plants and animals?
Agriculture is important for our food and for a lot of people's livelihoods. And I think that I would support those that are looking to be more biodiverse in their practices. And there are several ways to just be more friendly to biodiversity, just by changing, for instance, the time of seeding or harvest, or for ranching, just instead of seeding things to tame pasture, just leaving it as native. So a lot of these benefits are actually protecting the native prairie, especially for ranchers that are stewarding the native prairie, and they're just, they're working on these landscapes. And I think that's important, because I don't think the solution to protecting grasslands is to fence them off and not let anyone in. I think ultimately the solution is going to be that there are people who are working on these grasslands, who are raising cattle, for instance, on these grasslands, but also maintaining them to the extent that it's not harmful to the environment, and to the extent that other species can still use these lands.
You know, there's a lot of different ways to ranch. We're a cow-calf operation, which means we have a herd that is a commercial herd. They're more of a crossbred than a purebred. They're a Black Angus cross. The habitat's changed because there used to be a few elk, moose. We have wolves up the valley. There's always been, but they have moved in. And coyote population is vast. Rodent population of gophers is definitely increased because, you have to poison them a certain way. And once there's less control of grizzly and wolves who have no predators in the parks because you can't, shoot them. They have no predator. So they just multiply and multiply. So what's happened is that the elk and the wildlife that have been in the parks have moved into the foothills because the danger is there. They're eaten, their babies are all eaten, and it's vicious. It's a vicious cycle out there. So we find, we have a herd of 200 to 800 head elk that zoom through here. So the problem is we have all these elk here now, and your stack yards are bust, your fences are all broken, and you're constantly chasing them out of your land onto someone else's land.
The ranchers, they see more elk, and so they feel, the population must be bigger. But that's just an assumption based on a bias that you personally experience, and it's not indicative of the actual population numbers. So what we really have to do is do aerial counts with, helicopters, drones, radio collars. You have to get those precise numbers, right? You can't just base your population numbers on the individuals that you see and how frequent they are, because you may just be seeing the same ones. You may be seeing ones that are being pushed out of their, or no longer have their natural habitat.
We knew a lot of species were declining. We knew some were increasing, and what we had never really done is like a balance sheet, looking at their population sizes. So we expected that common generalist species were probably the ones increasing, and that they might be replacing the more threatened species that are declining. But what we found that was a surprise is this giant net loss in abundance across all species. So some of the most abundant birds that are very common sort of generalist species, like grackles and robins, those sorts of things, were also declining. And so the net loss in numbers was huge, this 2.9 billion number. So that was a surprise. And the birds that were increasing were not numerically, they weren't abundant enough to offset any of that. So this giant net loss in the avifauna was the big result that we found there.
So in everything that was taught in the traditional Nakota way, everything was correlated to one another. So you had to have, they were connected all the way around like that. So sometimes when we hunted, we made sure that we harvested only what we needed. When a hunter goes out there, we're told not to shoot at the first thing that pops up or moves. You got to wait and see if that animal has a baby, or if that animal is pregnant, or if that animal, you got to make sure these things. You got to read the animal, and how you do that is you read the land around there. So in order for these animals to keep coming to you, we must take care of that land.